2 seasons there at Blue Devils B, or just 1 season?
I just did one. Yeah, I was kind of like core hopping for a bit. Yeah, I spent 1 season there, and the season after that is when I went to Blue Stars. So I did a season of Blue Stars 2017.
Right.
Yeah, which was honestly, it was, and I think it was honestly just kind of one of those things that seemed funny at the time, because like no one expected me to go in that direction. Yeah. But I did have a bunch of friends like at Blue Stars, like kind of like doing that thing from Pulse and things like that. Right, like I was starting to make more friends as like the people that I marched with at B Corps and PC started going to march those places. So I was starting to get more affiliated with.
There was a big Southern California thing there at that time because of John and Ian.
Oh yeah.
Teaching there.
Yeah. Which also makes me forget that I auditioned at Blue Stars the year before, 416.
Oh, really?
Got cut. Yeah. Sorry.
Those Blue Stars lines were actually pretty stacked. Those late 16, 17, 18.
Yeah. It was fun.
Any indoor? Early on, like right after high school, right after that summer with Blue Devils B, for instance?
I think going into Blue Devils B, that was still going into my senior year of high school. So after that, I still had another year of high school drumline, but I did actually audition for RCC and Pulse when I was in high school, because I knew I wanted to kind of get myself like in front of those people as well.
For the 2017 season or 2016?
2016,
I think, yeah, I did RCC 2016. I went for Pulse and RCC 17 because those weekends happened to be separate. And then, so it wasn't until after I did Blue Stars, which was my first time actually being eligible to like march outside of high school. And I remember thinking like, I think first choice for me was actually RCC at the time. But doing my homework and knowing, like I knew that in 2018, they were coming back with a full vet quad line. And I also had friends in Pulse. I had tons of friends in Pulse, and they were talking to me a lot about like how much like there was this family vibe that was kind of like unforgiving, and like this, it was just like uncontrollable. And like, I could see it, like the way they hung out, just being around them. And I remember just being like, that sounds pretty cool to me. Like, I'm pretty cool with that. So I remember going into Pulse and in 2018 and doing that audition, and pretty much I've been at Pulse since then. So yeah, so like crazy how like just kind of fresh out of high school, that was kind of my first thing. But it was after the long buildup of like a bunch of years of just doing work and practicing and working hard. And even like the 2018 like audition, I didn't nail it. Like I was still like fighting for that spot still. So
yeah, that's one thing you mentioned, like the Pulse, the family vibe.
Oh yeah,
that's one thing I've noticed when going to shows and different things over the years, is you see the Pulse guys and the whole organization, they're all really circled up with each other, and it's cool to see because it's like very supportive,
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's only, I feel like in my time there, it only grew and grew and grew. Like just kind of like over time. Like I think even like my first year is a lot of like, not even like as much as like we just said it, but like I could feel it more and more and more as the years went on.
Do you ever realize that maybe part of the reason why it grew was get people like you and Zach and
Yeah, and honestly, like I do think about that a lot. It's kind of crazy because we also like, we can tell too, we could feel the energy building as like, like the year that I was able to be section leader, and Zach and like Jacob, and we were all also having this sort of synergy, the three of us, knowing that like, because we would just have all sorts of like phone calls all the time about Pulse and just like talking about things in the activity we love and like what things we like, what things we don't like, and like how Pulse can be better, and just having all these like outside of rehearsal conversations like all the time, especially in like COVID too. Like a lot of that time was us just talking like it wouldn't be better if like Pulse was like, we could do this with Pulse, or like if we could do that with Pulse. And so then by the time we got back together in 22, then it was just kind of like full fledged. We had all these ideas and we were like, it's time to execute, And so, and then luckily too, I feel like over time, John and Ian, they kind of grew more trust in us as like a membership, as we became more down and more family oriented, more catered towards the vibe of the group in a very productive way. Not just like, yeah, we're vibing, we're just chilling, but more like vibing. No, we're going to work hard together and healthily, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's something really interesting. It was a double-edged sword, the pandemic, right? It was you had seasons taken away from you. But the other part of that is that it was a forced stop in the activity, which makes you basically just stop and look at the activity, look at your life, look at how much you're valuing things. It's very easy when we do this to just keep going, right? Because the seasons overlap a little bit and you could just keep doing that. It's like, oh, as soon as I'm done with this, I got to go do the next thing. And you never really stop to, and it just becomes like this slow, cycle that repeats over and over again, versus pandemic happens and like you appreciate things a little more, your perspective on things change a little bit. And maybe you guys, your generation coming up in Pulse, you were there, right? Your perspective, John and Ian feeling a sense of being like really safe with you guys, right? Like this generation was in good hands with you guys, and them now having done this for over 10 years and having had a lot of success and feeling like, if we want to bring this into post-COVID era, maybe it would experience some growth and an evolution, bringing the membership a little more into it.
Oh yeah. And we could tell that too, because like, I think as we even got into like 2019, like, and I'd say this probably started more 2018 for sure. Like 2018, and John and Ian, they decided to take a completely different style of show writing for themselves. And I think that entire show kind of opened up a sense of vulnerability. Like that's kind of what the show was more or less about.
Yeah, that's what it was about.
Yeah,
right?
It was just like opening yourself up, right? So I think after doing that, like us, like the membership as well as the staff, like everyone was so emotionally invested. I don't think I've ever seen an ensemble quite as emotionally invested into a show as like that show since. It's kind of crazy. But I think there's probably something having to do with that in terms of like them being more open to the idea of like letting more influences in and things like that. So 2019, I think, is when we started to get more collaborative and a lot more of those things, especially amongst the membership, and just being like, yeah, no, those things weren't great in 18. Like, let's get rid of that. Like, let's work hard. Let's do the thing. Let's not waste time.
You talk about 2018, and you said that it was a change of style for the organization, show wise. Do you think it was hard for the audience to digest the new style that they were trying to do?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, well, especially like judging community wise. I've talked about this with John quite a few times because I think everyone was so used to Pulse being the very on the nose group, being very, especially coming out of
the show is going to be clear,
right? Yep.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to be left up to interpretation, and in that show there was definitely a bit more of implicitness, I guess. But I mean, a lot of people liked it. I think the judges didn't quite get it as much, which is kind of funny because I think even in some judge tapes and things like that, some people thought, they were reading too on the nose about it, trying to take the old style and seeing Pulse in the same sort of lens. But we were definitely just like trying to view things differently. So we kind of just have learned how to work around that. And honestly, I feel like over time too, like it was just something, it's an experiment, right? So it was something that we were trying, and there's things that we liked, things that we didn't like, things that we moved on from. And I think like as the years got like through, I think that they found more of a way to incorporate a more appropriate blend of like all the different styles that people like, of what we want to do and things like that. And I think it's just going to keep going and going and going. So
we're talking about like 2018 Pulse, but let's talk about like you marching Blue Devils. Was 2018 your first year in Blue Devils?
Yes. 2018 was finally my first year doing Blue Devils. I think I'd auditioned 3 times before then.
Was that a stressful audition for you, 2018?
Oh yeah, it was stressful, and it was just wild because also I knew as well once we were there, like that was pretty much an all rookie quad line. Like we were an all rookie quad line. Like the spots were pretty much anyone's game. I did feel really prepared though. So I think in that sense, I wasn't as stressed. And I spent most of my, I tell people this as like audition advice too, but like trying to spend most of like the time once you're at the audition, like just find ways to decompress like whenever and wherever you can. Just like just chill yourself out. So I think like in that sense, overall, yes, I was stressed about it. I think once I was there, I was like, no, it's go time. This is mine. Like we got to take it. You need to have the sort of aggression to kind of take what you know you've earned and what you want to earn, right? And so yeah, it was kind of wild. And once I got there, that was my first year learning, just kind of like being a part of something that I've always wanted to be in, something that I originally thought was impossible. And then there I was kind of doing the thing after so many years, so many twists and turns and things like that I didn't know that I'd be in that position right at the time. Something that's funny about that summer too is I was a weekend warrior because I was doing UCLA, studying there.
Oh, right.
And so like I still didn't finish school until like mid-June.
Mm-hmm.
So I missed almost like a month of move-ins, but I was kind of like going up to NorCal every weekend, learning whatever show they had just learned, going back, doing school.
Doing the grind.
Doing the grind, doing all that stuff, and then going back. So like for a first season with Blue Devils, it was kind of crazy, but it was also, it felt like the most safe place to be doing that with organizationally. Like it felt like I was never too stressed as long as I was on top of my stuff.
The thing that you said about finding ways to decompress during auditions, I want to talk about that just like a little bit, because something that I've always something that I've heard, ever since like sort of re-engaging with the activity and stuff like that, and seeing old friends and stuff at Blue Devils and RCC, was that when you're a staff at that level and you are trying to make decisions about who to take and who not to take, one thing that a lot of prospective members, tend not to pay attention to as much is, from the staff's perspective, it's like everybody that shows up is good, right? So if you were in their position, how do you make a decision between a bunch of people that are good, right? That have the sort of, the things that you would assume you need to show up with: really good hands, mastery of the material, all of that stuff. The staff then starts to look at other things, like how are you managing the weekend, right? How are you managing when things don't go well for you, right? All of those things that maybe, people when they show up, they don't think is being watched is actually the thing that is being watched. And I just wanted to sort of highlight that because you brought it up. And it's really valuable to have a little bit of knowledge about that going into it.
Yeah, and that's one of those things I think is super overlooked, because people think, oh, I had the packet prepared, and oh, I had this prepared, but also like sometimes when you see the frustration come out in people, you think longevity. Usually staff members, as we're picking the lines, you're thinking end goal. Also, you're thinking full total experience for like not just that kid, not the individual, but for the section too, like for everyone else too. So usually a lot of the time we're thinking just like, who else is also going to fit in with the vibe. Not in a sense of like people need to change themselves to like try and act like a Blue Devil or anything, but like, can you keep your cool in a state of pressure? Because throughout the summer, there's going to be moments where, you're hungry, you're tired, it's hot, you feel like you're going to faint, but are you going to get angry about it? Or are you going to be able to chill yourself out, understand it's okay, and things like that, and work through your problems? And especially like as a team too, and being able to talk with the vets, being able to socialize with them and things like that. So like all those things are definitely factors that play in, especially like you said, once everyone's good. And it's kind of crazy. Like I'm noticing, like, especially in the more recent years, like it's getting harder because we're having to cut a lot of really good players at these lines. And so like, I always feel bad about it. And it's just like, so really tough decisions are made. And it really comes down to the nitty gritty of like, not just like who's always technically the best, but who can also function the best, who can play a more supportive role for not just this ensemble. Sometimes it's like more of a supportive role in just like the organization, like who will be an outstanding member of this organization and things like that too.
In these first couple of seasons of Marching Pulse, Marching Blue Devils, were there any struggles for you? Maybe not even struggles, but things that you knew that there were areas for growth for you that didn't have anything to do with the hands, that had to do with the mind, the emotions, being able to operate at that level? Or were you good? Like in terms of just like naturally just, in an okay place? Were there any moments of like, man, like, why is this part so hard for me?
Yeah. And you're saying this is when I'm still marching, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I was always kind of trying to assess myself like throughout each season, like as the time goes. Like I feel like I was never one of those, like I was never like the type of person that just kind of think like, oh, I'm just chilling. Like I was always thinking like there's got to be something else, like there's got to be something better I can do, something that the section can do better, and usually trying to like get my mind to those places more. Just always thinking like what's next? Was that
ever negative? Was it like ever too much?
For me personally, no, I don't think so. No, it wasn't like, because I think when it starts to get negative is when you start to kind of pull yourself into a hard state that's hard to get out of. And even if it did for me, I think that like it's okay to know that those moments do happen. And so I think I've probably gotten close, but I think as like a whole totality, not quite. But I definitely remember struggling certain seasons, like let's say Pulse or Blue Devils, just being like, the season was kind of weird. Like, and I don't know if like I wasn't being a good enough section leader or things like that, or if like I didn't manage the section correctly or things like that. Like I felt like I was being nice. Maybe I was being too nice, which is I've kind of been told a lot, especially in a lot of my years. People are just like, you don't get on them enough. And I'm like, I'm trying to help the vibe or something like that too. But I think it wasn't really until I did Pulse 22. And I think after having all those conversations mid-COVID that I kind of really developed a keen sense of like where the fine line was of kind of just like keeping the vibe cool, but also being very assertive and direct with what you want, as a leader in a sense. So it was, I think like at that point is probably when I finally felt the culmination of like, okay, I think I got this. Was like my age out. And it took all the way until then. Like each season was like another learning curve, especially with different groups of people too. Like there's no one size fits all when it comes to leading and like nothing like that. You just kind of got to take the situations as they come and just see what happens and then work from there.
Something I wanted to ask you about, you wanted like, of all of this, Blue Devils was always that, that goal for the young, Elijah. And then you get to do it, right? So it started off as this thing, I don't know if I can do that, right? I don't know if I could ever do that. And then you work hard, you make it. Then you actually do it and you see it from the inside, right? Was there anything that you learned that season that you never would have been able to tell from the outside?
Ooh. That's a good
what
question.
I mean? Because and the reason why I ask you this is Jared. I was talking to him about this exact thing at Crown rehearsal. The idea of him getting brought onto that staff. He had worked with Mike before and stuff like that, but him bringing that perspective of like what happens, on the inside to create the thing, to get to that level consistently, because, for anybody's opinions about Blue Devils, and I know that they're varying. The one thing most people, can argue with is the level of execution they get to by the end, right? I think a lot of people would love to figure out how they do it. Was there anything just about how they went about, dividing time, or like what they put attention on, or just how they worked material? Was there anything that first season that made you go, oh,
yeah,
this is how they do this?
I think for sure, first thing that comes to mind for me is just the heavy emphasis on and visual emphasis. And most of the preseason is kind of like, I'm sure you guys have heard like about the organic staging style of the Blue Devils visual package. And so like seeing that firsthand, my first season was unlike anything I've ever seen before. Like people on a field just being like, can you get from there to there and how many counts? I don't know. Try it. Let's see what happens. And like kind of, and not going about like, oh, like this is your dot, your T1, and kind of mapping it out like that. I feel like that process in its entirety was something where I was like, whoa, like,
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, you know, sometimes that means less drumming time, right? And so like with one thing means that sacrifices have to be made elsewhere. So I think what also surprised me was the amount of not drumming that would happen, especially. And that kind of happens, I think, with a lot of like people who first do Blue Devils, and
Yep.
a lot of my students, they're so like, we want to drum more. Like, can we just drum? And it's like, understand, like the time's going to come, but we have to make sure that the show is right. Because if the show is not right, then what are we doing? Like, what is this all for?
I had that exact conversation with some of the staff, I think with Jamie Hawley, when I went to 22
Yes.
rehearsal, because that was like a rookie battery.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
primarily like a rookie battery. But this idea of like, we don't get to drum very much. And here was my takeaway from that. Not getting to drum as much as you thought you would be able to changes your perspective on the time you do get to drum.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, we're not going to have every afternoon block to be able to work this part. Like today, when we work this part, we really need to achieve. And then we need to retain.
Yes.
You know, it almost creates an environment where it's like, we don't know when we're going to get to work this again. We really need to nail this now, versus drumming all the time. And you're just like, it's fine. Like, we'll probably work on it again tomorrow.
Yeah, where you get into like the monotony of like the reps and things like that too. Yeah. It's like the more that time is precious. And honestly, I think to go off of that too, like I think that the second thing that surprised me the most about that environment in doing that was the trust that the staff has in us to be able to like, you know, like if we're not drumming that much, they're not pressuring us to like, you guys got to drum more. You guys got to do this, that. It's more like, we picked you guys because we know that in the end, once all is said and done, you guys will perform the show to the best of its ability by then. So like, I think the second thing was like that sort of like trust that was had in like the membership. And hopefully like that's the same thing now, where it's like, we pick them with the intent of knowing that, you know, you're not going to have all the drumming time. You guys have this energy to be able to work these things out when the time comes, and to be able to work through all those challenges together. And also like, you guys clearly have the hands for it. You know, it's like, that's kind of the easy part.
Mm-hmm.
After doing Blue Devils that first year, was there ever any time or thought to doing RCC instead of Pulse? And I only say this because I know RCC is a Blue Devils group, and I know you really love Blue Devils.
Yeah.
Was there ever any thought or maybe pressured to go to RCC?
Yeah, it's funny. I always felt like the odd guy out, you know, just like kind of doing that. And like, I think, and too, like when I was in high school too, like I did also think about wanting to do RCC too. And I think after 2018, my first season with Pulse too, right? I did that. I think, of course, I was having thoughts about like, you know, what is life like over there? But then also like seeing the sort of vulnerability that we had that season, and kind of seeing everyone kind of break themselves down and being more down for it after we kind of like tore it apart and put it back together again. I felt like I could see like a future in which I can really make an impact and shape the ensemble at Pulse. And I knew that like, that's not what all of my Blue Devils friends were always going to like, you know? But that was kind of the nature of it too. But it was never like I really thought one was better than the other. I knew that like I felt like we had something good going at Pulse. And it felt like as the years went on, it was like, no, we're definitely building something. Like something is kind of stacking, something that's taking its time, you know, versus trying to go to something else that's already established too, which is also like, there's no problem with that either.
Yep.
Like it's kind of just whatever you want to make the most out of your own experience in the activity.
And yeah. And you know, like seeing that little window of like, I can, there's more of an investment here where I can actually help shape the thing that is operating at the top level, you know? Nobody would ever fault, right? Like you making a choice like that.
Yeah.
So you go into the 2019 season for Pulse. That was a pretty stacked line as well, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
That show, very aggressive.
Yeah.
You know, came out firing on all cylinders, pretty much all season. Did you know that going through that season or
Yeah.
going into that season?
Yeah, it was definitely like the 2019 season was easily, I'd say, the hardest show I've ever had to do. Like so many challenges, like the two sides of the floor being divided, all sorts of ensemble demand, vertical alignment challenges up the wazoo, and like also just visually. That show was crazy. And I think most people who marched that show would probably say the same thing. Like as we got further in the show, the vis got harder and the tempos got faster and we were running more and it was getting like the tension was just building. So, and honestly, it was really fun. Like I remember having a blast just working hard, but man, was that show hard. It was pretty hard. Yeah.
It was really clean finals night.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Definitely working hard. And I think that's when, like around that time too is, like I think it was that season too where we really decided to put the pressure on the early season. I think that was one of the first seasons we were really going about like let's go for like the top tier quality like ASAP.
I literally remember filming you guys at, I think it was the WGI Southern California, not the big show, but like just like a regional. It was down at like Great Oak High School, and it was pretty much a rehearsal. It was like Glenn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like Glenn and Fred, and you guys were like, it was just a block of rehearsal where you were just working the parts.
Right in front of that little parking lot area.
in front of the little parking
Yeah,
I
we
remember
were
that.
kind of like, well, and I think the Great Oak Regional too, that's usually when we stack on new show as well. So it's kind of like making sure that all the parts are nice and tidy, you know, trying to get those things. And then sometimes, you know, it's like, it's okay. It's like whatever the group needs at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That summer, your second year at Blue Devils,
Yes.
right? Were you section leader then or no?
Yes.
Okay. Did you guys win that year?
Yes.
What was that like?
Yeah. That season was honestly like one of those seasons where I think at the beginning, like, you know, as we were doing the beginning parts of the competitive season, like we weren't really sure like what the outcome was going to be, but all I knew was just kind of like, just stay in our lane, do our thing. Right. And I think the whole core kind of felt that because that was kind of the year where we were kind of going back and forth with Blue Coats.
Yep.
The entire time,
like,
all the way through finals.
Nothing was certain
Nothing
until
was
the
certain.
very end.
Yeah.
From what I remember, it's like you guys started, and then by the time finals hit, it was like a whole nother level.
Yeah.
Compared to the beginning of the season. It's like the staff at Blue Devils, I feel, definitely knows what to do on how to pace the season so everything hits when it needs to.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it definitely felt like that too on the membership side. Like as the season went along, like we weren't quite getting down on ourselves. We're more like, no, we got to do more. We got to hit more reps. We got to have better reps, you know, more often and things like that too.
Let me ask you this real quick. You guys won and everything, but now we're talking about being a Beatles fan and inspiration.
Oh yeah.
You look on the other side of the field and you see a whole Beatles show. Was there ever any part of you thinking, man, I wish I could be playing some part of the Beatles show?
As soon as I saw that show announcement, I was like, oh man, I was like, why couldn't that be my show? Please? Yeah, but it also like, it was great too. Cause also, doing Pulse 19, also like John and Ian, they decided to use some Beatles inspiration, John Lennon inspiration, things like that, which I was like, yes, I love every bit of it. Like as soon as John played like the version of the ballad, like it was based off While My Guitar Gently Weeps, right? And I was like, and I knew it was going to be the love version too, and things like that. And as soon as I saw Blue Coats' show and announcement, I was like, dang, now they're doing that show? Like maybe I couldn't, you know, but yeah, no, I remember just being such a fan from the beginning. Like I remember as soon as that first run came on, like YouTube, the Blue Coat show, I remember just watching and I made like a playlist for myself. I was like, I think these are all the songs I can hear off of there. And like, it's like solid 10 something songs, maybe more. I don't know.
Because they did that sort of like, it was like a medley mosh, like,
Yeah.
like little call outs.
Yep.
And stuff like that.
And so
also.
every little thing I could hear, I was like, yeah, I think that's that. I think that's that. I was like, oh, I think that's the trumpet Penny Lane. Yeah, that's it. You know, and then just kind of like going about it. But like I remember just being so like hyped to see like that sort of like just seeing another Beatles show done in drum corps.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I'd ever see the day, and then it just happened.
So also, I was going to say 2019 summer, Vanguard goes undefeated in drums,
Oh yeah.
with the exception of one show
Oh yeah.
And that the show to win drums at, you guys ended up winning drums.
Yeah.
That was finals night.
Yeah. It was kind of crazy. I feel like that, and that entire summer too, like we never really were like we never gave up. I feel like kind of going about that summer. Like it was it felt like we were trying to fight for the end too. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of crazy. And Prosperity put up like a crazy number. And it's one of those things. It's like, it's just, once we do the show, it's not in our control anymore, you know? And so like, as long as we had like the show of our lives, and finals was really good too. I think like all three of those shows were really good. And something for me too, I think this was more of a personal thing. And as being like the section of the quad line that year, like honestly, I didn't really watch Vanguard videos. I was just kind of like hearing about the numbers. I didn't really watch anyone else's videos. Mm-hmm. I was just so like bought into like what we were doing. And I was like, what do we got to do like this next week? What do we got to do like tomorrow? Or like how are we going to do this part better? How are we going to make that part better?
Right.
And I felt so like tunnel vision that like I felt more fulfilled, like trying not to think about, you know, those other things. I think those can sometimes like kind of cloud your mind in like the competitive state. And honestly, like for me, it's just more like, well, what do we have? Where are we at right now? Because honestly, until we're tickless, it's kind of hard to like,
right.
you know, refute anything. Right. So
yeah,
like,
I think 2019 was one of those years, like 87 and 89, when the drumline score really helped affect the overall placement massive. Of everything. Yeah,
it was massive.
It was so close.
And it's well not as controversial as like 87 or 89. I mean, maybe down the line it will be, but I mean, you talk to certain people and the feelings about that finals night drum score, because you got like a perfect score, right? Did you guys?
I think
perfect score. It was like close to perfect.
I think it was an achievement. It was on one of the boxes. I think.
Here's what I'll say though. I went to rehearsal. I think semis day, Blue Devils that year, and I remember having a conversation with Nick, basically saying, you know, if any judge was going to be able to essentially tell how difficult that book was to execute, it was going to be Prospery, you know, and that's really all you can sort of ask of the judges. Something that I know is that Blue Devils really prides itself on being able to do stuff that is at the top level of difficulty, you know, in the playing, in the moving, in all of that, you know. That's really important for them, and it's really important to them for people to get, for people like, you know, like the judges to get. And the conversation I had with Nick was like, Jeff is going to be able to tell, you know, like just as a player, he could look at that stuff and just go, that's hard, you know? And what everybody was doing was difficult that year, but I think that was just that little bit, right? That little bit of like, I know, you know, sort of intuitively, you know, where that sort of stands, right, in terms of difficulty.
I always think of the reference, or the way you put it. I don't know if not reference, but you put it to me like this one way. You probably won't remember this if we're talking about. You put it in terms of like going to a gourmet restaurant. Mm-hmm. It's like you can have a whole plate of everything, or you can have
a tasting menu.
Of all the fine little dishes that there are.
Yeah, that's more of like when people don't understand the way like Blue Devils constructs their shows, right? Like the analogy basically was, you know, you're getting all the best bites, right? So there is very little connective tissue. There's very little like, oh, those mashed potatoes were good. No, it's like, you know, or, you know, like when you get an order of fries, there are those fries that are at the bottom of the bag that are like the best fries, right?
Bag fries, yes.
So, you know, I think, and this is just from the outside, but it feels like Blue Devils makes a conscious effort to just constantly be jumping from this really amazing bite of food to this bite of food to this bite of food. And then when you look at it, the progression, right? Because that's how those Michelin-starred restaurants put it together. When you look at the progression, you can see the thread. There's a thought process to it. You can see the logic of it and stuff like that. Versus like making the judges wait at any point to be impressed. They never have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like kind of like And we've been seeing that too, like just like even in the recent years too, like I feel like of course you do have to be smart about your design in terms of like finding the right moments, trying to make sure the drums are accessible to the judges and things like that in terms of design. But then also just like really making sure that like one of the things that I've talked about, I think with like most of the staffs I've been with too, is like a really great like first impression, leaving a great taste in the mouth, you know, like before like you kind of go on for the rest of the course, right? And like trying to like get them on like a wild ride. And so as you keep executing, finding the right moments, the right times, and trying to do those things, and especially in a collaborative effort, like it's way like easier said than done, you know, and especially like when you're working with so many people in a drum corps show, I think like year to year, each organization is still trying to figure those things out.
I would argue most organizations are chasing like the level of understanding, you know, of feeling like this is the way we need to go about it. I feel like everybody has those questions, unless you're winning or like constantly in contention. Everybody's like, it's a little bit of like a puzzle.